first understand your funnel and then provide those metrics so that you don't end up with reps worried about the outcome, not the inputs and the things they control every day in order to get to the outcome. And that results in a really productive team who feels like they're making progress towards their goals versus a super stressed out team who knows they have a goal at the end, but doesn't have a definition of what good looks like.
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Alluviance, Alex Kremer. All right, y'all, what is up? And welcome back to the Rising Leader Podcast. This is your host, Alex Kremer. I've been thinking about this podcast. I think you were actually, Cassie, one of the first people for me to ask to be on this podcast, or one of the people I was like, she's definitely going to be on this.
Kremer, I think I wasn't one of the first. I think I was the first. So I don't come in second or third, and you know that.
You were the first. Even before I had a podcast, I was like, Cassie, you're going to be on my podcast. So, Miss Cassie Pless, it is very good to have you here. I'm going to just give a little intro on who you are, and then I'll give you the if I messed up things, that I said things that were not true about you, which I might just create this whole story about you. But first off, you are a VP of sales at Lexion right now. You've been there for a year. It's your first VP of sales role. When I saw you get that title, I was like, let's fucking go. You were formerly at Outreach. We were at Outreach together for 4 years. So Cassie and I were the exact same role, just she was on the West Coast. I was on the East Coast. And you know those types of people that like there's a respect between the two, but there's also how would you describe it? We're very competitive with each other. Let's call it that. And just learned an absolute ton from her. Also, some fun facts about you, Cassie. You're an Orange Theory and Pilates instructor, which is awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
One could say you have the best hair in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, well, now that you don't live in the Pacific Northwest, I think that we can say that confidently.
I was actually going to say that. That's
today is not your day, though, with this tiny piece.
And then the third fact is, if you go to her LinkedIn profile, she's actually the one skiing at the top in that photo. So just, you got a whole vibe to you, Cassie.
Thank you. I like to think so. And I like to do, I think you've nailed my personality pretty well. I am competitive to a fault. And so pretty much anything I like to do in my life is tackling something that is a challenge. So whether it's Pilates or Orange Theory or skiing or running, like you name it, I probably have tried to see if you can win at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Didn't you just run your first marathon recently? It was like a year ago.
I ran what I believe will be my first and last marathon because I've decided that 13 miles is an achievable distance. And somewhere around mile 18, like I don't think my human body is intended for that amount of distance. And I don't think that you're supposed to do something for that long between eating. And I think the snacks on the course don't count. And you definitely can't drink Diet Coke while doing that. So it's not going to work for me.
That is also another fact about Cassie. She is quite literally addicted to Diet Coke. By the way, didn't your husband not you guys did the marathon together, but he barely made it or something like that? Wasn't there a story around that?
Oh, he tells the story very differently than I do, but I'm a runner in that I will make it to the finish line. It is not pretty and it is not fast. I won't tell you my mile time. It's slow, but he claims, so we ran a half marathon. And so we were halfway through training and we decided to run a full marathon. And I told him, let's go run Vegas or New York. And he found Pocatello, Idaho in August. Now, how I got him back for this is he had to run at my pace, which meant that he was running, and he claims for an additional 2 hours longer than he would have needed to in the 90-degree heat. So when he puked at the finish line, I felt zero sympathy. And because he was really fast, he didn't practice eating the snacks. And like I had practiced stopping, enjoying a snack, continuing on.
You would literally, so you didn't even, when you were running it, you didn't even like eat the snack while you were running. You would literally stop and eat the snack.
Take a break.
I respect it. I mean, the fact is
they should give you like a handful of breaks for like the snack period and then restart the clock. Because it is very challenging, I've come to find, like learning how to eat and run at the same time. And the cramping that happens with that is like truly painful. So anyways, first and last marathon. But I'm back on the half marathon train for sure.
The thing is, you can't be great at everything. Eating and running at the same time is just one of those things that you're not. And so we accept that. And you're human.
Thank you. I am going to add that to the list of things that I'm not good at. Thank you.
So on the topic of just you being a leader, you just moved into this VP of sales role a year ago. And I know that you were director of sales for 6 years. And you were also an incredible individual contributor as well, account executive. And, it's interesting because I feel like you are someone who is known for creating a really great culture and a group of people who not just feel positive, but also feel like, hey, like it's fun being in here. And it makes it more fun to sell and more fun to be a team and whatnot. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've had not just the success, but it's been pretty quick success. I think you're the youngest VP of sales that I know of. I guess I'd just be curious of like, when it comes to how you go about your role as a leader in creating that positive and fun, great culture. How do you go about doing that? How do you think about that?
Well, first, thank you. I appreciate that. I think for me, it's a couple of things. And I'm always striving to build the teams that I would want to be a part of. And for me, the things that are, and I am happy to talk about the transition to VP of sales, because I think people talk about all of the, oh my gosh, it's exciting. Like they don't talk about the things like, holy cow, like this is really different than the job I did before. And nobody's exactly teaching you how to do it, right? So we can talk about that in a sec. But in terms of like the team and the culture, I think a lot about like, what would I have wanted on any of the teams that I was on, right? And it comes down to me to how do you provide them with the leadership that is hyper engaged and focused on making them successful. And, I think this is something that I really loved about our partnership at Outreach. And you and I went about it different ways, but there was never a day where I doubted that you were in every deal with them. You were in with the strategy of the deals. Like when we were frontline leaders together, I think that we provided that to our teams and helped them be the best version of the seller they could be by supporting them. So I think first for me, it's identifying who are the leaders that can come in and support the teams, right? And not only like, hey, like, here's our goals, here's what we're trying to do, but show them how to do the job really, really well. And then I think second piece is, and why I love early stage companies is you can have a team of really interesting, creative, fun people. And I think what makes a team strong is, and Anna Baird, who we used to work with at Outreach, would say this all the time, the diversity of thought. And so I think about our team right now, like we have so many different types of people, but everybody can learn from each other. And like, it's a win when I am not the smartest person in the room because I've hired other really good, smart people who are good at wildly different things. So I think when you identify that, and then when you put in place really clear expectations for people, you can create a really fun place to be where you hold people accountable, but they enjoy coming to work every day, whether that's on Zoom or in person together.
Yeah, two things that you said that I felt a resonance to, and that I know that you do is, first off, you were supporting reps by actually being in their deals. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's not common. I think it's the exception. And when you do that, you're not just showcasing, hey, here's how to sell it, and you're part of it. But you're also, you're the example of, this is how one should always be studying and learning how to do this. Like, you were constantly trying to figure it out yourselves, and I think it supported a lot of your reps in getting ramped up quickly, so that then you didn't have to always be in it. Go ahead.
I think that the difference there, and like, this definitely took me a period of time to learn, like, it's not about doing the deal for your rep, right? And like, I think both you and I have definitely done that and like been guilty of that. And I think for a lot of leaders, that's the challenge. But there is a difference of, how are you there for your rep, and how are you still in touch with the deals in a way that a rep actually comes to you for strategy help, right? And they're like, hey, I'm stuck in this deal. This is what it is. I'm trying to build this deck. This is what it is. And you're close enough to the buyer that you get it, right? And like, I think that you and I both did a really good job of that. And it iterated itself over time, right? Because I think when I first became a leader, Lord knows, like, I took over way too many calls. And so that's been, a really big transition for me of like, how do you support on a call and make sure the call doesn't go off the rails? But at the same time, like, got to let people make mistakes and learn and get better.
I mean, now that I'm assuming a VP of sales role, you can't do that. Like, just straight up, you're not able to get in the deals and do it for the rep, or just partner the rep as much. What would you say has been like the biggest difference from moving into that role compared to previous ones that you were at? And I asked that question too, because I think there's a lot of people who listen to this show who really like are thinking, hey, I'm an AE, maybe I want to get a management, and then director, and then VP of sales. Like, it's just the path that a lot of people think about. And so curious that jump.
Yeah. So, I think when you're a manager or you're a director and you've got a team, right? Like, you're trying to influence those reps, like, make sure they're super engaged, that they're producing the best that they can, that you're influencing those deals that ultimately will hit your number. The biggest transition to being a VP is now you're influencing managers and what they're producing. And you're also influencing at a much more macro level what's happening within the business, right? And like, here at Lexion, we talk about the idea of first team. And first team is not, for me, my sales team, right? First team is our executive leadership team. And it's thinking about, hey, like, we're going to turn something into a standalone product, right? That was previously something my salespeople had sold. Okay, that's the right thing for the business. Here's what we're going to go do with that. So it's thinking about the business as a whole, thinking about how to influence different pieces of the business in the right way to drive the right revenue outcome for the organization. And so it's just a different way of thinking about it, right? And hiring the right people and trusting that you've hired the right people under you to go execute against different things. And so it's a transition of what you're focused on, and also a transition of letting go of control. And the exercise of hiring right people and trusting them to go run their business.
I mean, the journey of a leader, I feel like, is super repping it, like you said, to then being able to let go, to delegate, and to trust. And I feel like also that bridge between the two is an extremely hard bridge. Like, how do you actually feel like, hey, you got this? And even if it doesn't look exactly like I thought it should, I'm trusting right there. Yeah. Has that been a hard step to go through?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast, but like,
Please,
absolutely.
swear the hell away.
Like, holy shit. Yes. Like and I think it's one of those things where it's also an acceptance that different people get to outcomes in different ways. Right. And like, what I pride myself in is hiring people that do things differently, because different buyers buy from different people for different reasons. So my job is to provide them with the enablement and the resources to then go put their own voice on it and then execute. So for example, we just rolled out what's called Demo to Win, which is I think like the gold standard in terms of demo frameworks. And it's a process, right? Where it's like you do a tell, then you do a demo, then you come back and tell them what you just showed them, right? And that provides
the old tell, show, tell model you're talking about.
Yeah, Kramer. But that provides a really good framework. But what different people are going to say, the energy in which they say it, how they relate to people is all different, right? And so again, trusting that you've hired the right people, you've given them the right resources, they have the right coaching. And when all those things come together, but of course there are days where it's super hard, right? Like there are days where you're like, holy cow, like why wasn't this number where I wanted it to be, or what happened to that deal? And learning to not lose sleep over those types of things. Like I feel like I've come night and day in terms of that. I'm like, God, I sleep good now. But you have like, and nobody teaches you. I think this is where what you're doing is actually really helpful to people like me, because there isn't a course out there in how to go from managing a team or managing yourself if you're an AE, right? Like the transition from managing yourself to managing a team, and also recognizing like that might not be the best path, right? Like choosing to manage yourself is also a full-time job, right? Like, so acknowledging like, are these the things that bring me joy every day? And deciding like that's what managing a team is. And my AE leader, who I adore and I've known now for 10 years, we've been at this our fourth company together. But for her joy is in managing salespeople. And like that's what Erin will do for the rest of her career. And it brings me great joy that she has like come to that realization that that's most important to her.
One thing that you said that I really liked is giving a demo about giving the demo.
Yeah.
Because I think giving a demo, especially in software sales, is such an art how to do it. And, you spoke to like the methodology of, the tell, show, tell, which there's other conversation we can have about what that actually is, but specifically like the tonality and the energy that someone is bringing to it. And the thing is, everybody has a different energy and way of conveying or connecting or whatever it might be. So I just, and you've also, you yourself, I remember at Outreach, you gave a ton of demos to potential investors. And it was like, you were asked to go and be like, hey, like these are the most important demos that we can be giving because we make a lot of money from this. And they chose you to do it. And I think that says a lot about your understanding of that craft, in addition to the larger strategic things.
Yeah. And demos, like I think demos are fascinating. I think demos can be a fabulous part of your sales process, or they can be the world's most boring part. I read, Mark's content. I'm sure you do too. Mark Costello on LinkedIn. And he posted something recently just about how dull most demos are. And so I think that a demo is something that a lot of people don't take. And we've been working on this on our teams. Like if you're not prepping for a demo and you're not sitting down to say, hey, like what specifically am I going to show them? And who do I want to talk about? And what stories do I want to land? Because no one remembers the 800 features that you showed them. They remember the story about the prospect that's similar to them, whose life was improved because of this. And so, but that takes prep work, that takes time. And so for me, I was a sales engineer for a period of time. I love the art of figuring out what to show people. And then watching people, you see their eyes light up, and you see them start to ask and engage in the hard questions and reach friction when you're showing them the right stuff, not all of the stuff. And when they're just slacking in the background because you put them literally to sleep. And you're like, yep, check, I just did a demo. It's like, no. Like, you just could have recorded yourself and like sent that out.
You know, on the topic of like, how do you create a positive and good culture? Like, one thing I just noticing about you as you even share that is you also really enjoy that process right there. You enjoy learning about it. You enjoy the art of it. You're curious about it. And you also, because of that, you bring a passion to it as well. And I think when you think of what creates a great team, are people feeling passionate about what they're doing, about what they're selling, about the problems they're trying to fix. And when you as the leader are first showing up in that way, you're simply going to create just the energy going downwards that people are going to, come from that same place too, because you are doing that. And I think that's like a thing that I feel like isn't looked at enough of like, hey, is the VP, is just the leader in general coming from the right, I'm just liking this and I'm enjoying this. And is that going to impact the rest of the team?
Well, you could probably speak to this. Like, I was talking to our BDR leader the other day, and we were talking about, we're hiring some BDRs right now, but I think there's a lot of people who are burnt out on sales in general. And sales over the last 4 or 5 years is really hard for a lot of people. And I am genuinely in love, in the least creepy way, with sales. And I think you are too, right? Like, I think about it. It consumes me in a way that, like, I watch way too much YouTube about it. And I think it's something that you can never actually master. And it's psychology. So it's endlessly interesting. And so to me, how lucky are we that we get to do a career that every day you do something that's endlessly interesting. And I don't think most people get to do that. And so I hope what I bring to my teams is, sometimes I think they think I'm delusionally optimistic, but a energy and an enthusiasm for not only Lexion, like, I think we solve awesome problems for our prospects, but I think that we get to do a career where you never reach the peak. And that is something where other careers, like, you get good enough at it and you're just sailing. Like, here, you're never sailing. You're always can get better. And that is really, really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like how you share about, like, you're enjoying the never ending game of, there's more to learn here. There's more to figure out.
It's endless. Like, it's literally endless because it's human psychology, and it's figuring out every single deal. Yes, there are patterns in deals, and yes, you can run process against deals to be able to drive more predictable outcomes. But at the end of the day, you really are seeking to understand the psychology of the person on the other end of the phone and how you can get them to an outcome that solves their problem and is also, getting you closer to your number, right? And like, those two things need to come together. But in a way, like, I view it just like I view a lot of other things in my life. Like, it is an incredible game that if you're really good at, you can win.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to understand how to influence people, but not coming from a manipulative perspective, but more coming from let me just simply really understand how you think, how you operate, what you're inspired by, which makes you want to do things, and what you also don't want. Yeah, it's a study of much more than just, did you do these 3 steps of the prospecting process, or did you, whatever it might be. It's so much deeper.
Yeah, we sell a product here at Lexion that and I sold ADP for a minute, but like we sell against a product called Ironclad, and they're a great competitor of ours, but nobody gets fired for picking Ironclad, right? Like it is a known entity. It's the largest provider in our space, in the mid-market space. And we not only are convincing people, hey, you should do something different than what you've always done, but we are convincing them that you should take a risk and do it with us. And I think that bridge of how do you get from not knowing someone today to the other side of that bridge is they trust you. And they are saying to their internal people, and they are using their political capital based on the relationship with you to go say, hey, like they can not only, like they can best solve our problem, and I trust them. And gaining people's trust, I think, is a very, and we talk about it all the way from the first cold calls that we make outbound. But what does that sound like? And for everyone, it sounds different in like how you get there. But I think that's the psychology element of it that's so interesting. It's how do you build that trust with somebody you don't know?
I mean, how do you
do, and it's in a world where, and I would love your take on this because of all your work with your stuff with Alluviance, but in a world where I think we've lost touch with some of the more human elements of what we do in our regular life, right? Like we order our food on an app, we date people on an app, like we do all of this stuff. And I love sales because it takes us back to when you're in a bar, do you say hi to somebody who's sitting next to you?
So have you ever heard of the forthcoming, or excuse me, let me start that question again. Have you ever heard of the fourth turning?
No.
What this essentially says, because it speaks to what you're talking about right now. Essentially, these guys wrote this book in 1997, and they said history repeats itself every 80 or so years. And all the stuff they predicted to happen came true, like 9/11, the financial crisis, a potential coup, just different stuff that's happening. And essentially, they gave the example of like 1776. There was like this big uprising, overcoming, something they didn't want to be oppressed by, and there was a new model that came after, a new way that they engaged with the world. 80 years later was the Civil War. Same thing. Group of people came together, went against like hatred in the world. New model entered into the world. 80 years later, World War II, fought against evil. New model that like the world engaged with. The U.S. was on a different level, and they're predicting that by 2030 is going to be the new thing, and it's always led in by a crisis. But then there's truly a new way you engage the world. And what you're speaking to of like apps, like people are ordering food on an app or dating on an app. People are engaging with their work differently. Cryptocurrency is changing everything. AI is changing everything. Like you feel it starting to kind of culminate. Like it's going to crescendo at some point of like, what's happening here? Like there's a new way that's coming through. And yeah, it's just as even tying back to leadership of like you're, being a VP of sales, working in corporate, like corporate is very important, like straight up. Like, there's so many people who are doing side gigs now too. It's like, and they're leaving. Like if people who are truly feeling a certain resonance of like goodness, so to speak, don't continue to lead and grow within corporations, like there's something happening. We need good leaders.
Yeah. No, and I believe that, and I've worked for leaders where I knew they really cared. And I worked for leaders where I could tell they were caring as a function of a means to an end. And it goes back to me to the curiosity and having a genuine curiosity to get to know people, whether that's your prospects, whether that's the reps on your team, whether that's the people on your engineering team, like whoever it is, the person at the bar, right? Like I think that people can tell when you are genuinely interested in them. And one of the things I've been trying to live by this year is be interested, not interesting. And how do you take the time to not kind of know somebody, but actually listen to understand? And I think those are two really different things. And we've become way too transactional and and I think that's why people get tired and they get burned out, is tied to a lot of that stuff of actually not knowing the people that you're around.
Be interested, not interesting. That's a very good statement right there. I want to take this also another route, because we talk about being, I love what you said. It goes back to the what is it called? How to win friends and influence people. Be genuinely interested in other people. So there's that, like the psychology side of it, but there's also the tactical side of it. And, one thing I know that you are really good at as well, that you meet people where they're at and support, like from an energetic perspective, but then you also help them use their left brain to get it. And one thing you talk about, and I've heard you talk about with your team, is know your numbers, right? What are the numbers that are actually going to support you in getting to where you're going to go, so you can at least hold yourself accountable to that? I would love for you to expand on that, because I've seen you do that before, and it's very powerful.
Yeah. So I think that I believe you also felt this especially during the darkest parts of COVID, where being a leader can be a really emotionally exhausting exercise. When you feel that you are taking on the responsibility of other people's performance. And so what I work with a lot with my leaders is, how do you make sure that everybody is accountable and everybody understands their numbers? And I think the beauty of sales is it is just a math problem. And if you can help people understand their math problem, they can work productively towards the part of that math problem that they need to most impact. So, for example, with our AEs, we know how much revenue we need to get to at the end of the quarter. We know our win rate. So that backs into, okay, how many active deals do we need to have at any time? And behind active deals is a lot of different things, right? To get to an active deal, you have to have a qualified meeting. Then beyond a qualified meeting, how many meetings do you need to run to get to that many qualified meetings? And then there's going to be some meetings that don't show up. So for us, we do the math to say, hey, here's how many first meetings you need to have on your calendar next week. Here's how many of those ideally need to turn into qualified pipeline. And then if you're doing X amount of demos, your pipeline's in a really healthy spot. And it provides clarity in terms of what people can expect to then go out. And I always say, if you do the right things every day, you get to the right outcome. And so if you do those activities, you ultimately are going to end up in a place where you have a really healthy pipeline and you're able to execute against your number. Because if you sit there and stress about your number, you're never going to get there. But if you say, hey, every week I need to have 5 initial meetings on the calendar. How am I going to do that? That is an achievable goal that you can actually work towards. The same thing is true on the BDR side, right? Like their funnel is just higher up, but the same thing rings true, right? And I think as a leader, it is on us to understand and show the reps how to calculate, hey, how many calls do I need to make in order to get how many correct connects? And then when I get a correct connect, how many people do I convert? And then what is my conversion for a BDR, by phone, by email, by LinkedIn, so they can understand where their meetings come from and put more energy into the one that's ultimately going to convert the most amount of meetings for them. So to me, that's on leaders to provide, to first understand your funnel and then provide those metrics so that you don't end up with reps worried about the outcome, not the inputs and the things they control every day in order to get to the outcome. And that results in a really productive team who feels like they're making progress towards their goals versus a super stressed out team who knows they have a goal at the end, but doesn't have a definition of what good looks like.
Yeah, that's what it also allows for you to do is that if a rep is not performing well, you can simply say, hey, look at the numbers. You're not hitting them. Like, these are the key metrics that you need to hit to actually get to the bottom. It's that's one of the hard parts about leadership is if you're coaching, the more objective you can get with it, the more that they say, hey, you're right there. But my question for you is, if you're coaching a rep and they're not quite hitting their key metrics that they need to be hitting, which it's important, but they're not quite missing, but they need to be like picking it up a notch. But also from a burnout perspective, they're pretty low. And they're struggling, just like it takes a lot doing calls, being on demos, whatever it might be. How do you think about coaching someone in between those two things?
Yeah, it's interesting and it's challenging, right? Because there is, number one, you can't take on the accountability of someone else to yourself. That's where leaders burn out, is where you have someone who's not performing and you take that on to yourself. So in order to hold somebody accountable, I really think about them as an entire person. And if they're coming to work and they're low energy and they're tired, you need to look at, hey, like, what's happening in work and what's happening outside of work that's resulting in this. So, we use a sauna here, and I am obsessed with the sauna, like beyond obsessed with the sauna. I'm going to go sell a sauna, but we use a sauna for our one-on-ones. And I was sitting down with one of our BDRs recently, and we were talking about, like, his call volume was down. And what we came to find out is he had stopped doing the workouts that were really important to him. And so redefining and understanding for reps, like, what are the things you need to do to come here and be productive every day? And it's not about, oh, I need you to go grind 12 hours to do this. We can do our jobs in a reasonable amount of time, but when you show up here, you have to have the energy to do that. And so identifying with reps, where does your energy come from? So for myself personally, I feel the best when I go to my 6:30 in the morning workout class. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to give it my best. When I don't do that, I don't feel as good. So I think you have to think about all of those things together. And then you can ask the best of the reps when they're here. Because otherwise, people get tired and people get burned out. That's human.
Yeah, I like how you also are trying to understand what supports them specifically, because everybody's got their own thing. And it comes even back to what you said earlier, be interested, not interesting. Are you actually getting to know who your person is? Like, what actually do they want? What actually energizes them? When it comes to, hey, if you're burnt out, like, that's probably tapped in because you don't fucking care what you're doing right now. Like, you're not actually excited by what you're growing and developing into.
Or maybe you feel, and I've had a couple examples of this, where you don't feel like you know the people that you work with. And I think a piece of a really successful team is caring about the people you work with and hitting your goals together. And a piece of what I've identified is sometimes you run into people where they live a wonderfully full life. right? And like, if you have a wonderfully full life, but you're still drained at work, maybe it's like, God, do you have some friends here? Like I remember there were periods of time at Outreach where like I had the best time with you, with Sunshine, with Chad, like these people where it was like we were in it together. So I think also identifying, hey, do you have some people that haven't built relationships? And how can you facilitate relationships for them internally and help them find connection that maybe they've been missing? And that to me addresses a lot of turnover problems. It addresses engagement problems because now not only are they coming to work, but they also are doing it with people they genuinely enjoy.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you don't know anybody, are you having that much fun? Probably not.
I love the statement. Do you have any friends here? Like, be friends with your coworkers. Like, I love that statement there. And, I think when it comes to motivating somebody, I think there's two main things that people want. People want meaning and they want community. Like that's really it. If you give them like purpose and you give them a group of people to actually be in pursuit of that purpose too with, like, they just feel fucking good. You can't help but get lit up to that. And then learning the craft of sales is then so much easier because learning the craft is simply in pursuit of that purpose that you're doing with everybody else together. It ties it up so well.
And you all care about each other, right? So there were quarters where you crushed me, but I was never not rooting for you to win. Right. And like, I think when you are friends and you care about the people you work with, you all are better because you care about their success. You care about the team's success. You care about the company's success. And to me, that's the flywheel of a really, really good org. But it's at the basis, it's the build of trust and the build of relationship, which like, I believe we've lost sight of as a society, like, which is a bigger topic, and I think you've done an awesome job trying to bridge that with the programs that you're running now and what you're doing full time, because I think people are seeking this. And I think organizations aren't always providing that. And that is a really, really big disservice, not only to the people on the team, but ultimately your results.
Yeah, I think it's well said. And probably the scariest part of like, it's hard to actually bring this to a culture, right? Yeah. One of the reasons why, and this is kind of going back to, again, why I think you're so effective is because you're embodying it first. And if the executives at a company are just saying like, hey, why are people not energized? Why are people not good to be here? It's like, look in the fucking mirror, dude. Like, how are you? What state are you coming from? Do you feel a sense of purpose in this? Do you feel like you're friends with your colleagues and these are like this is your crew? Like, if you're not coming from that vibration, like, don't expect anybody else to be doing it.
Yeah, it all comes, and like I said, we talk about first team. Like, it comes from first team, and it comes from the energy that you bring is the energy you're going to get back. And so, I care a lot about that, and I love finding places and finding people and surrounding myself with that. And then I don't feel like I ever work.
First team is a pretty badass name, by the way. I think of like Air Force One when you say that.
First
Air Force One is the plane, right?
It's also shoes.
That's why I was confused with what I said. I was like, is that a shoe or is that a plane? Oh man. All right, Cassie, I have uno más question for you. And you know this question. So I just want to give you a shout out to you. I think you're one of the most common listeners of the show, which I am massively grateful for, which is also why you freaking crush this podcast, because that's what you do. I also just want to acknowledge you. I've said it a few times here, but you're an incredible leader, and you're also bringing a good energy that is giving a lot of teams what they need right now, and also being a great example for what other leaders hopefully continue to embody. So thank you for that and spreading that wisdom here. And here is my final question for you. The show is called the Rising Leader Podcast. Miss Cassie Pless, what do you view as the rising leader?
I'm gonna answer your question, and then I'm gonna come back to what you just said, which was really kind. To me, the rising leader is somebody who, God, it's so many different things from her, but to me, it's somebody who is building and creating connection. And that is connection among the teams, and that is connection with the buyer. And I think it is. I think it's being interested, not interesting. And like, I think our society has lost sight of that. And I think bringing that back and bringing back a genuine desire to improve, a genuine desire to know the people that you work with and to know the prospects that you sell to will help you win a whole lot more. So for me, I think if I could boil it down, it's like the rising leader is somebody who understands how to connect people and how to create that flywheel that ultimately leads to really connected people, connected prospects, and great results. And, Kramer, I think I have always really respected you, and I respect a lot of what you're doing right now. I think it's really cool. And I think the second piece of that, and I think that the rising leader is somebody that's doing the things that bring them joy. And I think that it's been so fun to watch you and your life do the things that bring you joy. And I feel like I get to do the things in my life that bring me joy. And I get to root for the people that I care about along the way. And you are certainly at the very, very top of that list. So I think the rising leader is somebody that does the things that make them happy and does them really, really well. And that's you.
I received that. Thank you so much. Oh, really, thank you. So joy. Find what gives you joy. That's the rising leader. Miss Cassie Pless, thank you so much for being on the show. For all those who listen to this, you know there's somebody out there who needs to hear these wise words of Cassie. So make sure you send this episode over to them. But Cassie, thank you again. Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader Podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.